Welcome to Infinite Universe with new interesting episode. Deep under the quiet hills and forests of Europe, there are still tunnels and bunkers that once shook with the thunder of World War II. Today most people walk above them without ever knowing they are there. If you stand on a sunny playground in southern England or hike through a pine wood in Slovakia, you might be only a few steps away from walls that once echoed with sirens, gunfire, and frightened voices. These places feel cold even on a warm day, not because of the air but because of the heavy memories locked in their concrete. In the war years they were filled with soldiers, families, radios sputtering urgent code and the hard hope that the next bomb would miss. Now roots split the floors, moss covers the ceilings and wind whistles through cracks like distant ghosts trying to speak. Yet when you push aside a bramble or duck through a broken doorway you step straight into the middle of the past, exactly where ordinary people once waited for history to decide their fate. Imagine you are in Canford Cliffs on England's south coast. Children run up and down a slide, parents drink coffee on a bench, cars hum by on the road. Nothing looks strange until your eye catches a low concrete wall beside the swings. It seems to be no more than flood protection, but a narrow opening leads into a short tunnel. Your shoulders brush damp brick as you shuffle forward. The passage opens into a cramped room, long enough for 3 rows of wooden benches fixed to the walls. 80 people could sit here, packed tight, knees touching, breathing shallow while the sky roared above. During the Blitz about 50 bombing raids pounded nearby Bournemouth. On some nights 2,000 bombs fell, turning entire streets to rubble. A hotel only a minute's walk from this shelter was blasted flat. Picture local families racing across the grass when the sirens wailed, clutching blankets, flashlights and whatever courage they had left. Children hugged teddy bears. Mothers whispered stories to drown the crash of explosions. Neighbors prayed the concrete would hold. The fear was sharp, but so was the will to survive. When the all-clear finally sounded, they climbed out into gritty moonlight, thankful to be alive even if half the town lay burning. Not far away a teenaged boy once raced to school only to find it smashed to splinters overnight. Instead of despair he and his friends turned wreckage into treasure, hunting the playground for twisted shards of a downed German plane. They stuffed pockets with jagged metal like strange souvenirs of chaos. In that little shelter you can still feel the echo of their nervous laughter and stubborn spirit. The bunker sits silent now, but if you close your eyes you might hear the rattle of anti-aircraft guns on the cliffs and taste the coal dust floating through a chilly dawn. Cross the North Sea, drive through the soft green fields of Poland, and you could stumble upon a grey hulk called Regalba 502. Built in 1939 as part of the Pomeranian Wall, it was a key link in Germany's plan to guard East Prussia. Many such defences collapsed after the war, crushed by bulldozers or buried under new homes. This one survives almost untouched. Its walls are thick enough to stop a tank shell. Inside, rusted steel doors still swing on their hinges. An observation cupola rare as a pearl juts from the roof like the crown of a buried giant. To enter you step through a gaslock chamber that once trapped poisonous air outside. Thanks to devoted volunteers, one room looks exactly as it did in 1940, bunks with scratchy blankets, a stove black with soot, field telephones waiting for a message that will never come. Next door, lights flicker in a multimedia display. Recorded boots stomp across speakers, distant bombs rumble and for a moment the hair rises on your arms. Outside stands a smaller bunker with a machine gun nest, proof that even a fortress sometimes wanted a bodyguard. Head south to the woods near Bratislava and you will find a different sort of ghost. Bunker BS3 was built in the mid-1930s by Czechoslovakia to defend its border with Austria as Nazi power grew. 21 soldiers once lived here, ready to face invasion. Heavy machine guns pointed through firing slits, ammunition racked along the walls. Yet war swept past without a shot fired. Afterward the bunker was abandoned to ivy and silence. Reaching it today feels like a quest. You leave the road near La Franconi Bridge, follow a rough hiking path, then push through undergrowth until concrete looms between trees. The roof is cracked, roots prying it apart. Moisture beads on rusted bolts. Bird's nest where soldiers once shouted orders. Nearby, the ruined shells of BS2 and other blockhouses lie half-sunken like toppled dominoes. They are reminders that huge efforts and vast fears can fade into quiet when history changes direction. Travel northwest to Denmark's windswept coast and the ruins grow immense. More than 450 bunkers sprawl across the dunes of Hansholm Fortress, once a jewel in Hitler's Atlantic Wall. In 1942, crews poured concrete day and night, forging a military city designed to choke the Skagerrak Strait. For naval guns as long as railway cars could hurl shells the weight of small cars across the sea. Underground tunnels carried ammunition on miniature trains. Anti-aircraft batteries bristled like iron thorns. Automatic mortars on standby could spit 120 rounds per minute. Any Allied landing here would have met a hurricane of steel. Today tourists wander those same tunnels with guidebooks and headlamps. Some chambers have been cleaned and lit as a museum, others echo with dripping water and gull cries. Step onto a dune at sunset and you can see gun turrets silhouetted against orange sky, stubborn reminders of a war that tried to command the ocean. Farther south beside Germany's Weser River stands Bunker Valentin, one of the most haunting monuments left by the Third Reich. Between 1943 and 1945, thousands of forced laborers, prisoners of war, civilians dragged from occupied lands, and concentration camp inmates were driven to build a colossal submarine factory. The structure stretches 400 meters, its walls 4.5 meters thick. It was meant to churn out Type XXI U-boats, sleek subs that might have strangled Allied shipping. But cruelty filled the concrete even before a single vessel floated. Workers starved on meager rations, shivered in winter, and collapsed under brutal beatings. 1,600 died for a dream that never sailed. British bombers smashed a gaping hole in the roof just weeks before Germany surrendered. Afterward, no one dared demolish the bunker, it was simply too massive. For decades it sat as a scar on the riverbank, used briefly for bomb tests, then storage. Only in 2010 did it become a public memorial. Now a 1.5-kilometer path winds through dim chambers where displays show faded photos, fragments of uniforms, and testimonies from survivors who recall darkness, hunger, and the constant threat of death. Visitors leave in hushed silence, the weight of the concrete echoing the weight of lost lives. Cross the channel to France and two Titanic casemates rise near Calais, Battery Oldenburg, nicknamed La Tour Lulu Rouge by locals. In 1940 these open-air mounts held captured Russian guns aimed at England. By 1942 the Germans had entombed the artillery in reinforced concrete 35 meters long and 15 meters tall. Inside, shell hoists, ventilation shafts and observation posts still hint at nights when crews waited for invasion orders that never came. Outside, wind rattles weeds growing from shattered embrasures. The sea pounds the shore as it did when searchlights once scanned the waves for Allied ships. All these bunkers share a strange double life. They were built for violence yet now sit wrapped in peace. Step inside and you can almost taste the fear etched into the walls, but you also feel the stubborn endurance of people who refuse to give up. During raids parents whispered lullabies under flickering lamps. Soldiers scribbled letters home, dreaming of normal mornings. Forced laborers carved secret marks in concrete, proof they existed even when their voices were stolen. Long after the guns fell silent, nature began to heal the scars. Moss painted grey stone green, roots split floors, skylarks nested where helmets once lined shelves. The bunkers did not disappear, they changed into classrooms without teachers, waiting for curious feet, shining flashlights and questions. When you walk through one you join an unbroken chain from past to present. You might imagine the rumble of distant bombers, the metallic stench of cordite, or the soft sob of a child clutching a doll. But you might also sense resilience, the steady heartbeat of people facing terror and still believing in tomorrow. Each cracked corridor reminds us that courage often hides in small places, a crowded shelter under a playground, a frost-covered trench on a Polish border, a forgotten machine gun post in a Danish dune. And each heavy door reminds us that cruelty too leaves long shadows, like the terrible cost stamped into the ceiling of Bunker Valentin. Yet even the darkest tunnels can lead back to light. Today volunteers clear debris so visitors can walk safely. Historians collect stories before the last witnesses pass away. Students sketch graffiti found on old bunks, turning it into art that speaks across generations. Families picnic near once secret entrances, free to laugh because those grey walls once protected or, tragically, imprisoned others. Skylarks sing above craters where shells once landed, their song a quiet victory over silence. Whenever you pass a harmless-looking mound or a strange concrete block half buried in sand, pause a moment. Picture searchlights slicing the sky, engines droning, and hearts pounding in dark rooms below your feet. Picture men with worn boots and women with tired eyes holding hands as walls shook. Picture the hands that mixed the cement, some driven by duty, others by chains. Then look at the grass, the playground, the open road, at children chasing a ball where bombs once fell. In that single heartbeat the whole journey from fear to freedom unfolds. The bunkers remain, solemn and scarred, but above them life continues, a testament that even the deepest wounds can become lessons, and even the coldest concrete can shelter hope. Deep below windswept cliffs and quiet towns lie enormous concrete shelters that once bristled with guns and submarines. These defensive giants were not placed at random. Engineers used maps, slide rules, and long days of field checks to choose spots where a single battery could sweep a huge slice of water with fire. The narrow stretch between Dover and Calais, nicknamed Hellfire Corner, was one of the busiest killing zones of the war. Artillery shells crossed that strip of sea so often it felt like rush hour during the apocalypse. To make certain Allied ships paid a price for every mile, the Germans dragged out 4 heavy cannon that had first served the Russian Empire in World War I. Krupp mechanics reworked the barrels from 255mm to 240 and fitted them with fresh breech blocks so each gun could hurl a 150-kilogram shell almost 30 kilometers, like throwing a concert grand piano from one town into the next. Their job was not to smash English harbors outright. Bigger coastal guns handled that. Instead, these weapons stalked the shipping lanes, ready to punch holes in freighters and scatter warships until the strait felt cursed. The artillery positions themselves were more than gun pits. They grew into small underground cities. Concrete passages linked barracks, storerooms, power plants, and even a hospital decorated with painted murals, perhaps a strange attempt to soften endless grey walls for wounded men who could not leave. Yet massive strength created a fatal blind spot. Every barrel pointed firmly out to sea. When the 3rd Canadian Division swept in from the landward side during September 1944, the big guns might as well have been museum pieces. Canadian infantry cracked the battery open like a tin can, and soon the once proud fortress stood silent above the dunes. Its hulking structures still watch the channel today, weathered but refusing to fall. Farther south on France's Atlantic edge a still larger monster rises beside the Loire estuary. The Saint-Nazaire submarine base took only 16 frantic months to build, from early 1941 to mid-1942, yet the finished block looks more like a granite mountain than human work. The roof alone is 10 meters thick, an armor plate of concrete, granite, and steel wide enough to park 5 football fields end to end. 14 pens line the river, 8 of them dry docks where U-boat crews repaired engines, welded hull plates, and loaded fresh torpedoes before slipping into the open Atlantic. But the base was more than a garage. It contained workshops, ammunition depots, sleeping quarters, a hospital, restaurants, and bakeries because even a submarine war needed hot bread. A fortified lock let vessels exit under heavy fire, flak towers and mortar pits guarded every approach. Allied planners debated whether the whole site might double as its own independent fortress if ground troops landed nearby. They never got the chance to test that fear. Today the giant cube still stands. Tourists wander echoing corridors, stare into empty pens where submarines once gleamed oily black, and climb to the roof for sweeping views of the river where so many patrols slipped away. If you continue along the coast to Cap Gris-Nez you reach another Leviathan, the Calais battery built by Organisation Todt in 1942. Here 4 Krupp guns, each 380mm across, stood within casemates 3 meters thick. A single shot could arc 55 kilometers, far enough to land somewhere on the English shore if angles and wind aligned. Camouflage crews disguised bunkers as farmhouses, painted fake doors and windows, and even planted artificial trees to fool reconnaissance pilots. High-ranking Nazis visited often. Hitler, Rommel, and Göring all paced the observation deck, outlining dreams of domination. Allied aircraft tried bombing the site, but direct attacks barely scratched the walls. Only when Canadian ground forces stormed inland in September 1944 did the garrison surrender. One vast casemate now hosts a museum, its gloomy corridors filled with artifacts, a preserved K5 railway gun, and original track that once hauled gargantuan shells to their hungry breaches. From firing ports overlooking the channel, a visitor can sense how determined Germany was to keep control of the sea. In Berlin, the war's end echoed underground. The Reich Chancellery bunker complex, expanded in 1944 into a labyrinth 28 feet beneath garden earth, contained 17 rooms with filtered air and steel doors wide enough for guard squads to pass two abreast. Carpets, fine furniture, and paintings tried to disguise the gloom, but by spring 1945 the bunker felt like a sinking ship. Soviet shells shook concrete ceilings, corridors reeked of diesel, sweat, and hopeless anger. On April 30 Hitler and Eva Braun killed themselves. Joseph Goebbels followed the next day, murdering his 6 children first. Red Army engineers later dynamited the surface buildings. West and East German leaders agreed that no monument to Nazi leadership should remain, so rubble buried the cellars. For decades the ground served as an unmarked waste lot, finally becoming an ordinary city parking area. Only in 2006 did officials place a small plaque explaining that beneath the asphalt lay rooms where the Third Reich died. Other bunkers hid not in capital cities but under quiet European villages. Keml, Belgium, looks like an ordinary rural hilltop, yet 15 meters below stands a Cold War command post built from 1952 to 1956. 2-meter-thick walls and a copper Faraday cage shielded radios and radar displays from nuclear electromagnetic pulses. 30 meters by 30 meters, the site contained diesel generators, filtered wells, and enough bunks for 600 staff rotating through 12-hour shifts, tracking Soviet bombers on giant wall maps. Plans changed when NATO centralized control elsewhere, but Belgium kept the bunker as its emergency headquarters. Only in 2010 did the government unlock the blast doors for public tours. Visitors climb narrow stairs into the 2-level ops room where dust covers teletype machines, colored pins still mark flight paths, and worn paper coffee cups sit beside gas mask canisters as if the officers just stepped out for a moment that never ended. The tour sparks a sober question. If such a fortress remained hidden 30 years, how many more might still sleep beneath peaceful streets? Occasionally burial is literal. Deep in Poland's Mazurian woods, the ruins of Wolf Lair, Hitler's Eastern Front headquarters, lure tourists who marvel at shattered bunkers swallowed by vines. Archaeologists clearing one structure, Hermann Göring's private shelter, expected to find nothing more sinister than burnt floorboards. Instead, 10 centimeters under the soil a human skull emerged. Continued digging revealed 5 full skeletons, 3 adults, a teenager, and a newborn, all laid out facing the same direction with hands and feet missing. No clothing, no personal items, just bone, ash, a burned key. Experts debate whether decay scattered small bones or if mutilation occurred at death. Forensic tests are underway, trying to learn whether these people died during the war or later, when criminals might have used the abandoned bunker for darker deeds. The find reminds us that even 75 years later the earth can cough up secrets capable of freezing the blood. Ambition sometimes collapsed before it could kill. Near the Belgian-French border, the Benét-Sauvulets bunker, codenamed Wasa St. Paulo, was supposed to store and launch 150 V1 flying bombs. Engineers poured 55,000 cubic meters of concrete, so much they built the roof first, then excavated underneath, a method called verbunkering that let work continue during air raids. 2 launch ramps would have fired pilotless missiles toward London day after day. But the RAF answered with tallboy bombs, skyscrapers of steel packed with explosives. 27 raids cracked the once invincible roof and blasted craters around the site. Construction halted. The bunker stands today like a wounded dinosaur, private but visible from the road, its walls leaning, rebar exposed to sun and frost. Hamburg hides another ruined colossus, the Elba II U-boat bunker. Begun in 1940 beside Haoldswerk shipyard, it held 2 pens 112 meters long and 22 meters wide, big enough for several submarines each. Allied planes pounded the dockyard, yet the bunker shrugged off hits, sheltering sleek Type XXI boats envisioned as Germany's war-winning sharks. In May 1945 crews scuttled the subs rather than surrender them. British engineers then dropped the roof, trapping steel hulls under broken concrete where they rust unseen beneath an ordinary parking lot. Occasional salvage attempts failed. The buried fleet remains, a silent fleet forever moored in darkness. Across Europe the pattern repeats. Great concrete beasts lifted from quarries and forests, filled with weapons and men, then either fell to attacks or were abandoned when front lines rolled past. Some became museums where schoolchildren listened to guides explain blast pressure and shell weight. Others rot behind warning fences or lie forgotten beneath weeds, known only to locals who might point and say, "That hill? It's hollow." All, however, share a common lesson. War builds with feverish speed, believing every wall will hold forever, but time, weather, and the shifting tide of events eventually pry apart even the thickest ceiling. Yet the bunkers also testify to more than engineering pride and brutality. Inside their walls cooks baked bread for sailors, doctors stitched wounds, mechanics swapped jokes under flickering bulbs, and young soldiers wrote letters about missing home. In Keml's command center officers trained endlessly yet never fired a shot in anger. Their careful readiness helped deter catastrophe. At Saint-Nazaire bakers pulled crusty loaves from ovens while above them U-boats growled to life. Humanity clung to normal rituals even in the heart of concrete. Walk through any of these ruins today and sound changes. Your footsteps echo, birdsong fades, and you comprehend how small you are under 40,000 tons of stone. A cool breeze drifts across your skin though the air outside is warm. That chill is the memory of men waiting for death and of others forced to labor until their bodies broke. Touch a wall and feel rough aggregate pressed by hands long gone. Out on the coastal cliffs grass waves where camouflage once fooled reconnaissance pilots. Children laugh at a nearby picnic table unaware that deep below lie rooms built to survive direct hits from 1,000-pound bombs. If you pause at that moment, you might grasp the strange balance these places now hold. They are monuments to terror and endurance, to cruelty and courage alike. They warn that technology without wisdom leads to endless walls and deeper graves. They remind us that ordinary people, sailors greasing engines, medics carrying stretchers, prisoners mixing cement, shape the hidden spine of history. And they show how even the hardest structures can turn into quiet classrooms where later generations learn what paths never to walk again. So, the next time you spot a squat block poking from dunes or notice a low doorway half buried in ivy, think of the stories sleeping inside. Imagine shells streaking through night skies, imagine diesel fumes rolling off submarine decks, imagine coded messages crackling over radios while generals argued above red-pinned maps. Then imagine the sudden silence when guns ceased, the click of padlocks as crews marched away, the first seeds landing on dust-covered floors. Decades later wind and rain keep sculpting those ruins, but the real power to shape the future rests with visitors who listen, remember, and carry the lessons out into the sunlit world above. Thanks for watching. Keep it and stay tuned. Like and subscribe our channel. Have a good day.